With the onset of winter, many individuals will be taking advantage of this time to properly prune their trees. Even yet, there's still a lot of mistakes that are being made, both in techniques and in trying to find the right individual or professional to do this type of work. Well, to help further educate us in this topic is Mr. Mark Bays of Oklahoma City. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Steve.
And welcome to the show. Now, Mark is an urban forester and arborist. He has a degree in forestry. He has his own business, and he's done some work with the Forestry Service. Now, that's important because I understand that we can really do some damage and harm trees if we don't know what we're doing.
Right. It's important for the arborist to have at least a general understanding of tree physiology. Without just basic knowledge, you can go in and make your cuts in the wrong areas, so you can really do a lot of damage, like you say, to the tree's health.
Well, what are some of the things, qualifications that we should be looking for in this type of individual? Is there a licensing program with the state of Oklahoma?
Well, there's not really a statewide regulatory commission, so to say, that goes in and checks up on these people. It varies city by city, so the best thing to do would be the person to contact City Hall or their licensing department or their code enforcement department and find out if they require a license for the city.
Now, you have an example of that, right, in Nichols Hills?
Yeah, Nichols Hills, they supply most of their arborists with a little card, and it's just for that pruner to carry on them, and you know, if the person has a question whether or not they're licensed, they can present that card to them.
Right. Well, what about like being involved in different trade organizations or groups like that? Would that help in this instance?
Well, it really would. There's several arborist organizations out there, ISA, International Society of Arboriculture being one, American Forestry Association is another one, National Arborist Association. There's a lot of professional organizations that supply updated material to their enrollees onto the current pruning practices, and those are also available to the homeowner that may want to be involved with those.
And that's important too, especially if an individual doesn't have a degree in the program. They can get more education and up-to-date information through these organizations.
Right. There's continuing education programs. I know that National Arbor Day Foundation, they actually have a urban forestry school that they have that travels the country and trains professionals with that. So
now, in addition to that, Mark, there's some things that we want to ask these individuals too, like insurance. I mean, that's very important, right? That the professional have insurance. What are we looking for in those instances?
Well, you want to make sure that they have liability insurance to cover themselves if they hurt themselves, workman's comp, property damage, your neighbor's property, and it's really important, especially if they're working on a large tree above your house, over your driveway and whatnot. Ask them for a certificate of insurance, and they should
be able to provide.
Yeah, it's just a sheet of paper, and it lists all the different forms of liability that's coverage.
Okay.
You know, and they should be able to issue this to you, and go ahead and call the insurance company and make sure that's valid, because you don't really know. This is just this is just a piece of paper, so get that and call.
Now, also, what about getting estimates from that individual? Any comments there?
Well, you want to make sure the bottom dollar. I mean, you hear all kinds of horror stories about, well, you know, your trees are going to cost $200 to trim, whereas you're getting 4 or 5 trimmed and find out that it's, you know, $200 a piece. So make sure you understand that bottom dollar.
Okay. What about money up front? I mean, should people pay until after the work is done?
No, I don't agree with that, mainly because it's a service. It's not like they're having to go buy plant material or anything. Don't put any money up front. Just wait till the service is rendered and then go ahead and pay.
And of course, trying to get good references from that individual is important. But another thing that I've found out is that in some towns they have particular ordinances dealing with how a tree is pruned too.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, we mentioned Nichols Hills earlier. They have a no topping ordinance, which is pretty important that the arborists stay in tune with their local regulations for that city.
Well, we'll talk about that a little bit more now. Mark, obviously you have an array of equipment here, but to give us some pointers on, we've got a lace bark elm here that you're going to help us pruning. What is the first thing that you do that might be good information to share with our viewers as far as where do you start?
Well, the first thing, one of the most important, is go ahead and remove all the dead. That's the first place that you get started. After that, then you start pruning crossing branches, things like that.
So there's reasons to be pruning these trees versus just doing it for the heck of it, right? I mean, we need to...
Mainly the dead in a tree, that creates an avenue for insects and disease to get into the tree, so you remove all the dead is the first thing you do. Next thing, go ahead and thin out the crossing branches, and then like any low-hanging obstacles that may be in the way.
So to get better air circulation, those types of things, right?
Right.
Now, what about a proper pruning cut? Can you show us maybe on one of these how to make a proper cut?
Sure. On all these lateral branches, there's what's called a branch collar, which is the swelling right here where this lateral branch comes into the main part of this branch here. And you want to make sure you make your cut just on the outside of that branch collar. I can get in there. Making that cut just on a little bit on the outside of that branch collar, that'll go ahead and heal over. This is actually right down there. You can see one that was done earlier, but that'll heal over real nicely. You don't want to make a flush cut because it'll take forever for the tree to heal out, if ever.
Now, there's a couple of things that you tell me that professionals do that is a sure sign that they're not really up to date on what's going on, and one of them is getting up in the tree. Why don't you go ahead and get up in the tree for us and comment on how you're doing that and what a person shouldn't do?
Well, in climbing trees, I mean, these are tree climbing spikes, and these are pretty much outdated. If you see your tree trimmer come out and strap these things on, I wouldn't let them up in my trees.
So that's good for telephone poles, but not live trees.
Telephone poles, yes, because you're puncturing, especially on these thin bark species, you're puncturing holes in and just creating a place where insect and disease can get into the tree. So really, with the ladders and everything that you have, there's really no need to even have those tree climbing spikes.
Now, Mark, one thing that we see all over the state of Oklahoma is where people go in with their chainsaws and they just top the trees and make them look like coat racks.
Right.
Is that a proper pruning method?
It really isn't. I've had people ask me to top their trees, and usually when they ask you to do that, they're afraid because a heavy branch over their house or whatnot. Really, you're combating the problem, because if a tree should ever recover from topping, the branches that sprout out from there are really weakly joined at that place, and you're just increasing the chance of that branch falling on your house to begin with. And really, topping a tree, it's environmental terrorism is what I like to call it. It's just not ethical at all.
Okay. So really, they're shortening the life of that tree by doing that practice.
Exactly. They're disrupting the root to crown ratio, all kinds of problems.
So really, you can go in and do the same impact without topping, and you've had comments from individuals that I'd like for you to share with us about when you finish the job.
Right. Yeah, one of the nicest compliments I ever had was one time a fellow prepared me for it too, and he said, I did all my cleanup work and got down, and he said, Mark, really, it doesn't look like you've even been here.
Right.
And it shook me up at first, but really that's the way it should look, because you're not altering the shape of the tree any. You're just kind of working with it to enhance its natural shape.
And what we're seeing now is some before and after pictures of the tree that you're working on to show us that impact. And again, it's a great job. Comment too real quickly about, should people put tree sealers on, tree wound sealers?
Well, I guess not. No, there's really no evidence out there that says that the tree sealant improves or increases the healing time. The only thing I would say, just a light spray application for cosmetic reasons, and that's it, if you've got a great big white tree wound, but it really doesn't help.
So, Mark, you've given us a lot of good information. There is some valid research and questions that need to go on then with individuals in trying to find the professional to do this type of work, because also there's a safety risk with that individual too if they try to get in and do it themselves, I'm sure.
Right.
Is part of it too. Well, Mark, keep up the good work. Thanks for the information.
Sure.
And that's all the time we have today. We hope you'll join us again next weekend here on Oklahoma Gardening.